Commander Vex'thor of the Galactic Defense Fleet straightened his crystalline uniform as his shuttle descended toward what the humans called West Point Military Academy. His fourth eye ridge twitched with barely concealed contempt. The Supreme Council had insisted he conduct this inspection of Earth's premier military training facility, though he considered it a waste of valuable time. Approaching landing pad, Commander announced his pilot, Lieutenant Nexus. Local atmospheric conditions are surprisingly hostile. Vex'thor clicked his mandibles in amusement. Everything about this backwater planet is hostile, Lieutenant. These humans somehow evolved on a death world and consider it normal. The shuttle touched down with practiced precision on a concrete pad surrounded by ancient stone buildings. Through the viewport, Vex'thor observed clusters of young humans in identical gray uniforms, moving with surprising discipline. He had expected chaos from such a primitive species. Commander, his cultural advisor, Officer Ra-Thai, consulted her data pad. The Academy Superintendent, General Amanda Rodriguez, is waiting to receive you. Remember, humans consider direct eye contact a sign of respect, not a challenge. How quaint, Vex'thor muttered, activating his atmospheric filter. The door hissed open, and Earth's brutal gravity immediately pressed down on his exoskeleton. He refused to show weakness, maintaining perfect posture as he descended the ramp. General Rodriguez stepped forward, her uniform adorned with colorful ribbons that Vex'thor assumed denoted achievements. Commander Vex'thor, welcome to West Point. We're honored to host a representative of the Galactic Defense Fleet. The honor is mine, Vex'thor replied automatically, noting with surprise that the general's handshake was perfectly calibrated, firm enough to show strength, but careful not to damage his more delicate appendage. Perhaps these humans weren't completely unaware of xenobiology. As they walked toward the main campus, Vex'thor's secondary hearts nearly seized at the sight of two young cadets engaged in what appeared to be ritual combat on a grass field. General, your students are attacking each other. Rodriguez laughed, a sound that made Vex'thor's antennae vibrate uncomfortably. That's just football practice, Commander. A sport for recreation and building teamwork. Vex'thor stared in horror as one cadet slammed another to the ground with bone-crushing force. Both immediately jumped up, slapped each other's protective gear in apparent celebration, and resumed their positions. You permit recreational violence. Encourage it. Actually, Rodriguez replied with an unsettling smile. Helps build character. Now, shall we start the tour with our combat training facilities? Vex'thor felt his chromatophores pale slightly. What kind of species considered that violent display merely recreational? And what did they consider actual combat training? For the first time since landing, he felt a twinge of genuine concern about humanity's potential. He had a feeling this inspection was going to drastically change his reports to the Supreme Council. General Rodriguez led Vex'thor into a vast indoor training facility where the sounds of combat echoed off reinforced walls. 24 cadets were paired off on padded mats, practicing what the general called hand-to-hand combat techniques. Vex'thor watched in fascination and horror as the young humans threw each other through the air, applied joint locks, and practiced strikes that would shatter most species' exoskeletons. This is just basic training, Rodriguez explained, gesturing to a particularly intense match. Cadet Thompson there is demonstrating an advanced takedown combination. Notice how she uses her opponent's momentum against them. Vex'thor's sensor implants registered the impact force as Cadet Thompson slammed her opponent into the mat. Both humans immediately sprang back up, bowed to each other, and began again. His medical scanner showed elevated heart rates and stress hormones, but nothing indicating serious distress. They appear undamaged, he noted with surprise. Rodriguez nodded. Humans are quite resilient. This is actually one of our lighter training sessions. Would you like to observe the advanced combat class? Before Vex'thor could decline, she led him to another section where cadets were practicing with training weapons. His threat assessment systems went into overdrive as he watched them seamlessly transition between different fighting styles, adapting their techniques mid-combat as instructors shouted scenarios and complications. Impressive adaptation, Officer Ra, the IF whispered. They're learning to fight against multiple combat doctrines simultaneously. A young cadet approached, sweat gleaming on her dark skin. General Rodriguez, Mom. The marathon team is about to start their morning training. Would you like to show our guest? Vex'thor checked his atmospheric readings again. Training? In this temperature. Perfect weather for a nice 20-mile run, the cadet grinned. Though some of us are training for the Death Valley Ultramarathon next month. Now that's a challenge. Rodriguez noticed Vex'thor's confusion. Death Valley is one of Earth's hottest deserts. The Ultramarathon is a 135-mile foot race in temperatures exceeding 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Vex'thor's translator must be malfunctioning. You run 135 miles? Through a desert? For recreation. Some people think it's fun, the cadet shrugged. I prefer triathlons myself, swimming, cycling, and running in sequence. They watched as a group of cadets jogged past, talking and laughing, as if they weren't about to run 20 miles in what Vex'thor's sensors classified as brutal conditions. His species considered themselves excellent warriors, but they would never willingly endure such prolonged physical stress without serious cause. Perhaps we should move on to the obstacle course, Rodriguez suggested. It's quite impressive. The obstacle course looked like something designed by a sadistic combat engineer. Cadets crawled under razor wire, scaled towering walls, swung across water hazards, and navigated balance beams while carrying heavy packs. Instructors fired simulated weapons to add stress, and occasional explosions sent mud and water spraying across the course. This is just training, Vex'thor repeated to himself, mandibles clicking nervously. Just training. Indeed, Rodriguez smiled, though we do spice it up with competition. The annual Sandhurst Military Skills Competition brings teams from academies worldwide. Last year's winning team completed the course in record time, despite a simulated chemical attack and having to carry a wounded teammate. A cadet emerged from the mud pit, uniform caked in filth, bleeding from several minor cuts. Instead of seeking medical attention, she immediately began the course again. Cadet Rivera likes to run it twice, Rodriguez explained. Says it helps her focus. Vex'thor made a mental note to significantly revise his species' assessment of human military capabilities. Any species that considered this level of physical punishment routine training was not to be underestimated. He hadn't even seen their actual combat drills yet. Shall we continue to the boxing gymnasium? Rodriguez asked cheerfully. Our heavyweight champion is defending his title today. Vex'thor's chromatophores shifted to a distinctly worried shade of green. He had a feeling he hadn't even scratched the surface of humanity's capacity for violence, recreational or otherwise. Vex'thor's antennae twitched nervously as he entered the psychological warfare division. The sterile white corridors felt more threatening than any battlefield he'd encountered in his military career. Dr. Nathan Drake, the head psychologist, greeted them with an unsettling smile. Today's training focuses on breaking and rebuilding mental fortitude. Fascinating process, really. Through an observation window, Vex'thor watched a group of cadets in a scenario chamber. They've been in there for 96 hours, Drake explained. No sleep, minimal water, conflicting orders, and they think one of them is a traitor. The goal, Vex'thor asked, dreading the answer. To see who breaks first, Rodriguez replied. Though this group is proving remarkably resilient. They've formed a fascinating pack bond. Instead of turning on each other, they're working together to try and outsmart the simulation. The cadets had created an improvised communication system using hand signals and coded phrases. Despite their exhaustion, they maintained perfect unit cohesion. One cadet started showing signs of collapse, and the others immediately restructured their formation to protect their weakened member while maintaining mission effectiveness. Notice how they adapt, Drake pointed excitedly. The worse things get, the stronger their bond becomes. Most species fragment under pressure. Humans? They forge stronger connections through shared suffering. Moving to another chamber, they observed an advanced psychological warfare class. Cadets took turns playing both interrogator and prisoner, learning to both break and resist mental manipulation techniques. One cadet was laughing, despite being subjected to severe psychological stress. Cadet Reese, Rodriguez explained. She has an interesting response to pressure. The more we push, the more she pushes back. We're seeing this trait with increasing frequency in recent classes. You're breeding for this, Vex'thor's voice cracked. Natural selection, Drake shrugged. Those who thrive under stress tend to succeed here. Now, watch this next exercise. We're testing their response to moral ambiguity under extreme conditions. The scenario involved impossible choices with no correct answers. Instead of breaking down, the cadets began developing solutions that existed outside the parameters of the test itself. They weren't just solving problems, they were rewriting the rules of engagement. How do you maintain control of minds trained to think this way? Vex'thor asked carefully. Drake and Rodriguez exchanged knowing looks. Control, Drake laughed. We don't want to control them. We want them to think creatively under pressure. The more autonomous they become, the better they perform. Yesterday's group turned our own psychological testing protocols against us, Rodriguez added proudly. Completely inverted the power dynamic of the experiment. We had to promote the instructor who designed the test, just out of respect for how thoroughly they dismantled it. Vex'thor's chromatophores paled to a sickly white as he realized the implications. These weren't just soldiers being trained. They were psychological weapons being sharpened through deliberate trauma, emerging stronger and more unpredictable from every trial. Shall we show him the empathy suppression trials? Drake suggested. Perhaps another time, Rodriguez said, noticing Vex'thor's distress. Though you should know, Commander, everything you've seen here? This is just the foundation course. The advanced psychological warfare training is much more intense. Vex'thor felt his secondary heart skip several beats. He needed to radically revise his assessment of human military potential. Any species that treated psychological trauma as a forging process rather than a breaking point was not to be underestimated. The lecture hall fell silent as Professor Alexandra Blackwood pulled up a holographic display of Earth's historical battles. Vex'thor settled into a reinforced seat, preparing for what he assumed would be a dry academic discussion. He couldn't have been more wrong. Today's lesson, asymmetric warfare through history, Blackwood announced. Or, as I like to call it, how to win when you probably shouldn't. The cadets laughed. Vex'thor didn't. Let's start with Vietnam, Blackwood continued, displaying a dense jungle terrain. A technologically superior force, defeated by farmers with punji sticks and underground tunnels. Can anyone tell me why? A cadet raised her hand. Adaptation and resourcefulness, I am. The Viet Cong used the environment as a weapon, turning their enemies' technological advantages into disadvantages. Precisely, Cadet Jackson. Now, who can tell me about the Winter War? Another cadet stood. Finland versus Soviet Union, 1939. The Finns were outnumbered 40-1 but used ski troops and hit-and-run tactics. They took down Soviet tanks with improvised petrol bombs. Vex'thor's datapad nearly slipped from his appendage. They attacked armored vehicles with burning liquid. Molotov cocktails, Rodriguez explained proudly. Named after the Soviet foreign minister. The Finns even thanked him for the free lunch when Soviet planes dropped bread baskets instead of bombs. The class continued, each historical example more disturbing than the last. Humans didn't just study victory, they obsessed over defeats, extracting lessons from every failure. They analyzed wars across thousands of years, combining ancient tactics with modern technology in ways that made Vex'thor's threat assessment algorithms crash. The key to human military success, Blackwood explained, is our ability to adapt. Persian immortals, meet Greek phalanx, Mongolian horse archers, here's castle architecture. German blitzkrieg, have some resistance fighters. Every time someone develops an unbeatable strategy, humans find a way to beat it. But what about modern warfare? Vex'thor asked. Surely these historical lessons are obsolete. The entire class turned to stare at him. He felt his chromatophores shift nervously. Watch this, Rodriguez whispered. Excellent question. Commander Blackwood smiled. Cadets, how would you apply historical guerrilla tactics to orbital warfare? The answers came rapid fire, each more creative than the last. Space debris as camouflage. Asteroid mining equipment repurposed as weapons. Solar sail technology used to blind enemy sensors. Every ancient tactic had a terrifying modern equivalent. Remember, Blackwood continued, humanity's greatest military advantage is our unpredictability. The moment someone thinks they've figured out how to beat us, we change the rules. A cadet raised her hand. Like the Battle of Agincourt, am? When English longbowmen defeated French cavalry by turning terrain into a death trap. Exactly. Which brings us to today's practical exercise. You have 2 hours to devise a strategy for defeating a technologically superior force using only materials commonly found in a standard cargo shuttle. Vex'thor watched in mounting horror as the cadets enthusiastically began listing everyday items and their potential weapons applications. One particularly creative group was discussing how to weaponize cleaning supplies. "They're rather good at this," Rodriguez noted with pride. "Last week's class figured out how to turn a food synthesizer into an improvised mass driver." "These are military academy students," Vex'thor said weakly. "Surely civilian humans don't think this way." "You should see our engineering schools," Rodriguez grinned. "Now those students get really creative. Shall we move on to the Advanced Tactics Lab? Today they're studying how ancient Roman legion techniques could be applied to powered armor formations. The Academy's technology lab hummed with activity as cadets worked on various projects. Vex'thor's sensors detected everything from quantum computing arrays to what appeared to be sharpened steel blades. The combination made no sense. "Welcome to our Advanced Integration Workshop," announced Major Thomas Nash, the lead technical instructor. "Today we're exploring hybrid weapons systems." A cadet stepped forward, holding what looked like a primitive projectile weapon. "Sir, we've successfully merged railgun technology with traditional ballistic principles. The kinetic amplification field multiplies the impact force of standard ammunition by a factor of 10. "You're still using chemical propellants?" Vex'thor asked, baffled. "With access to energy weapons." "Redundancy," Nash grinned. "Energy weapons can be blocked or jammed. But try stopping a hypersonic bullet with an EMP. Our cadets learn to combine multiple technological epochs, makes them more adaptable." They passed a workstation where cadets were modifying powered armor suits. One had attached what appeared to be medieval weapons to the exoskeleton's arms. "Ah, the Knightly Initiative," Rodriguez explained. "Combining ancient melee weapons with modern battle suits. That war hammer generates a localized gravity field on impact, very effective against shield systems." Vex'thor watched as a cadet demonstrated, the powered armor moving with frightening grace as it wielded a monomolecular blade powered by a miniature fusion core. "This is madness." "This is innovation," Nash corrected. "Humans have thousands of years of warfare technology to draw from. Why limit ourselves to just the latest toys?" Another group was working on what they called steampunk enhancements, mechanical backup systems for advanced technology. Their reasoning was terrifyingly practical. Electronics could fail, but gears and springs were nearly impossible to disable completely. "Check this out," a cadet called excitedly. "We've adapted old submarine warfare tactics for space combat. Silent running mode using mechanical systems only. No electronic emissions to detect." The next station displayed what looked like primitive explosive devices. "Time-tested designs," Nash said proudly. "Combined with modern materials and smart detonators. Sometimes the old ways are still the best ways." Vex'thor's threat assessment systems were working overtime. These humans weren't just using advanced technology, they were deliberately maintaining proficiency with weapons and tactics from every era of their violent history. "The crown jewel of our program," Rodriguez announced, leading them to a sealed chamber. Inside, cadets worked on a massive project combining dozens of different technologies. "We call it the Synthesis Initiative." "What does it do?" Vex'thor asked, dreading the answer. "Everything," Nash beamed. "Energy weapons, ballistics, directed gravity, quantum entanglement, and good old-fashioned explosives, all working in perfect harmony. The cadets even added a backup crossbow system, just in case." A testing demonstration showed the terrifying versatility of human weapon design. When one system was blocked or countered, the weapon simply switched to another approach. It was like fighting an opponent who could change their entire technological base mid-battle. "The key is unpredictability," Rodriguez explained. "Any defense can be overcome if you hit it with enough different types of attacks. Our cadets learn to use everything from sticks and stones to antimatter warheads. Makes them very creative problem solvers." Vex'thor watched as a cadet casually combined a plasma torch with what appeared to be a simple lever and fulcrum system. The resulting device violated several laws of physics and at least 2 interstellar weapons conventions. "Don't worry," Nash said, noticing his distress. "This is just the beginning. Wait until you see what they're doing in the quantum mechanics lab. They figured out how to weaponize uncertainty principles. Cancel all pending military actions against Earth immediately." "What I witnessed at their West Point Military Academy changes everything. We are not dealing with an emerging civilization. We face a species engineered by evolution itself for warfare. Practical assessment. Their training methods violate basic sentient rights. They deliberately traumatize their warriors through sleep deprivation, psychological manipulation, and physical brutality. The terrifying part? It works. These cadets emerge stronger, more adaptable, and disturbingly creative. A human instructor told me, "We break them down to build them better." When I expressed horror at their methods, she laughed. She laughed. She laughed. Their technological approach ignores standard progression patterns. They keep everything. Ballistic weapons alongside energy rifles, primitive blades enhanced with quantum fields. Their warriors train with both sticks and antimatter warheads, switching between technological epochs with disturbing ease. Most alarming discovery: humans view technology as tools, not evolution. They have no loyalty to advanced systems. When their energy weapons fail, they simply revert to projectile weapons. When those fail, they use blades. When those break, they use their bare hands. Strategic implications. Our current combat doctrines are useless. They assume enemies will fight according to their technology level. Humans switch between Stone Age and Space Age tactics mid-battle. Standard containment protocols will fail. Why? Because humans treat limitations as challenges. They believe everything can be weaponized. Everything. Psychological warfare is futile. Their training programs intentionally create warriors who thrive on trauma. They call it stress inoculation. I call it evolutionary horror. Personal observations. I watched a cadet turn a food synthesizer into a weapon. When I asked why, she said, "Everything's a weapon if you're creative enough." This wasn't bravado. This was their standard mindset. During my final meeting with General Rodriguez, she said something that haunts me. "Commander, you think we're training soldiers. We're not. We're teaching them to adapt, to improvise, to overcome. The specific weapons don't matter. We're teaching them to win." Critical recommendation. Establish peaceful relations immediately. Not from a position of strength, but a position of survival. Humanity isn't just dangerous. They're innovative, adaptive, and worst of all, enthusiastic about improving their combat capabilities. Final warning. Do not mistake their diplomatic gestures for weakness. Every smiling human ambassador represents millions of years of evolutionary combat refinement and thousands of years of continuous warfare development. The Academy's motto reads duty, honor, country, but their true ethos: adapt, survive, conquer. For conclusion, I no longer fear human weapons. I fear their limitless capacity to create new ones. I fear their ability to turn anything into a weapon. Most of all, I fear they consider all of this normal. Personal status: requesting immediate transfer to xenobiology. I need to understand how their species survived long enough to develop civilization while maintaining such aggressive traits. Commander Vex'thor, in Galactic Defense Fleet. Yes. The humans invite the Council to observe their graduation ceremonies. I strongly suggest accepting. Very strongly.